Hey, what's going on, Rococo Salmon? Jesus Christ. Okay. Forgot I have to kneel for this. So, holy fucking shit, stay tight, stay on there, stay. Oh my god. Why? Why the fuck is it? Okay, I get it. I don't get it. Why is it the opposite? Okay, so... Okay. Anyway. Jesus. Hope everyone's having a good evening or good night or good whatever. Hope they're having a good day in general. I don't know what time zone you're in, but for me it's nighttime, so it's about 10 p.m. or so. So I'm just gonna wish you a good whatever it is that you're having at whatever time that you're viewing this video. And so yeah, this video was kind of a thing that I was planning out earlier this week. I was thinking about posting like to Instagram, this, you know, like brief book reviews. However, I'm going to be doing that on YouTube in like a video format because Instagram sucks shit and I hate social media. So, and I've been trying to detox, not even detox, just get away from it essentially. Because I feel like it has negatively impacted my mental health as of late. And so, I mean, in general, but especially as of the past few months. So, and I've just been wanting to kind of distance myself from it a little bit. And one of the things that's helped me a lot with what I've been going through is reading. And the reason that kind of started was a friend of mine at the beginning of this month recommended that I read The Lathe of Heaven and to trade, at least temporarily trade, my copy of Blood Meridian for their copy of The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. And so that's kind of where this started. And so since then I've read, 4 books, including The Lathe of Heaven. And so I'm going to be going through kind of a brief overview of each of those and giving you my thoughts on them and why I would recommend them. So the first things first, the first book I read this month, Ursula K. Le Guin's The Lathe of Heaven. This is a science fiction novel by Ursula K. Le Guin, and there's a lot of philosophical things also included in this, like the ideas of utilitarianism and Taoism. Long story short, it's about a guy who dreams and who's able to change reality through his dreams. Sometimes, and oftentimes actually, without his own kind of intention of doing so. It just sort of happens, and the way in which it happens can be very life-altering unintentionally. And so he tried to suppress these dreams that he can have by preventing himself from dreaming using certain drugs that suppress the dreaming state in sleep. But then he was discovered to have been abusing these drugs, and he's sent over to a dream psychotherapist to hopefully cure him of his issues with dreaming. But people don't actually think that he can change reality with his dreams. It's more so him, because he remembers the past reality and he's witnessing the new reality. And his psychotherapist, Dr. Haber, so the main character's name is George Orr. His therapist is Dr. Haber, Dr. William Haber, and I always think Dr. Haber, very Vosh-coded character, but anyway, he kind of has this want to harness that power to be able to alter reality through dreams for himself for kind of altruistic reasons. But Ursula K. Le Guin, she has a very interesting way of presenting ideas in a morally gray sort of manner, in which there's never really a right or wrong in terms of there kind of is. She does take a stand in what she believes in and what she believes is kind of the best solution for something like this in this type of scenario. However, she does not shy away from exploring those different facets of this sort of conundrum, that like this, you know, science fiction kind of conundrum of having dreams that can alter reality. Like, can you change the world for the better? Can you change people's personal lives for the better? Things like that, and whether you should do that. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Very good read. The next book I read after that one, which I read part of it earlier this year, but the rest of it, parts 2, 3, and 4, because it's divided in parts, I read this month. And it's The House of Medici, Its Rise and Fall by Christopher Hibbert. This is a nonfiction, historical nonfiction book about the Medici family in the Renaissance Italy in Florence. And it goes from basically the start, from Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici, all the way through to the end, the Duke Gaston or something like that. Like, I'm not as interested in those later, I'm going to be honest, I'm not as interested in those later Baroque period kind of Medici family members as I am with like the ones in the high Renaissance with Lorenzo de' Medici and so on, and his brother Giuliano and things like that, and then the popes that came after that. But yeah, in this book, this is kind of like a general history about the Medici family in like great detail, and going over the lives of, it's basically like a biographical kind of thing about each of the members of the Medici family and their effects on Florence, as well as Italian politics at the time in broadly, such as when some of them became pope, or one of them became pope at some point. I believe Pope Leo X or Clement VII, if I can remember the exact names, but I do know one of them became pope. It's like the fucking Trumps of Italy. But it's a very interesting read. You read about the Pazzi conspiracy, Savonarola, and also in the High Renaissance, shortly after the Pazzi conspiracy, I believe. So there's a lot of interesting things kind of touched upon. I think the most riveting part is the Pazzi conspiracy. It's just crazy what happens after with the riots and all this shit that went on. And so yeah, I do highly recommend this if you're wanting to get into a history of the Medici, and just as even like if you're just interested in Renaissance Italy, like this is a good place to start, because the Medici did fund a lot of projects, architectural projects, artistic projects, like with painting and art and things like that, and music, back in the day when they were at the height of their power. And this kind of goes over the Medici family most importantly, but they had such a huge relationship with the Italian Renaissance in Florence, and especially just even around. It kind of goes over how they influence them, because it's a banker family, so they had a lot of funding, throughout the time they existed, and they were able to accomplish so many things with that. Like they funded and helped pinpoint the design of Il Duomo in Florence, which is the dome of that massive cathedral that you see, which is very interesting to read about, that they were kind of behind that being completed the way it was. And then the next book after that I read is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, though this cover is very much not in line with how he would look, how the Frankenstein monster would look in the book. That's more of like the pop culture representation. This novel was a pleasant surprise, because I was at a friend's house. We were talking about Gothic literature. We got on the topic, and at some point she mentioned that she, has some Gothic literature in her library. And, I was mentioning that I would like to read Jane Eyre, like the Bronte sisters writings, maybe even something like with potentially, I wasn't really at the time looking to read Dracula or Frankenstein or anything, but I did mention that those were, Gothic literature, or pieces of Gothic literature that, are well respected. But I fully was not intending on reading those books, especially not like Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, things like that. However, she did have 2 copies of Frankenstein and wanted to give me one, because she just had 2 and she didn't read either of them. So she gave me this one, and I started reading it shortly after I got it, and I pretty much fell in love with it. It's very much so a different representation of Victor Frankenstein and his relationship with the Frankenstein monster, as well as the monster itself. It's like completely unlike the pop culture representations, which I was thankful for, because I was expecting this book to be like a monster horror book. But while it has a little bit of that, it is predominantly, it's overshadowed by the monster being sort of a philosophical conundrum in Victor Frankenstein's life. And so there's a very big conflict that happens between the two, though it's not like always, it's not very direct as a conflict. It's interesting to watch it kind of play out. But long story short, it's like a situation of the Frankenstein monster being shunned by society, and then things escalating from then on because of that. And Victor Frankenstein also shuns the monster at first because he's horrified by what he's created and horrified by what this being can do. But eventually the Frankenstein monster, or Frankenstein's monster, learns to talk and learns to read and is able to do all kinds of things. He's able to climb up mountains and run at speeds that are insane. Very different from the representation in pop culture of this lumbering, kind of dumb zombie kind of guy. Frankenstein is, in this book, at a certain point, you're like, this is indistinguishable from a human, outside of physical attributes. And it explores that. It explores social alienation or isolation, and it explores Victor Frankenstein's sort of relationship in this whole, or with relationship with the whole kind of ordeal of creating this being, and the moral issues that rise from that. And so it's a very interesting read, and I think it's one of the most beautifully written books that I've ever read. I don't know if that's just par for the course for Gothic literature, because I haven't read much Gothic literature. I just now started reading Jane Eyre today. However, this Frankenstein novel is just very, very beautifully written. There's some very beautiful passages, like there's the ones about the deer. There's a lot of nature passages, and a lot of passages about when Victor Frankenstein sees kind of the positivity in situations, and it's very relatable in a way where I'm like, yeah, I know this. I know what this feeling is, kind of what it's trying to get at in terms of the exact feeling, and it's just a very satisfying and very beautiful thing to read in a novel. And so I highly recommend it. Probably the most out of any of the books that I've read this month, it's probably been the best. And the last book that I read this month is The Children of Húrin by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this is a book that takes place over 6,000 years before the events of The Lord of the Rings. And I read The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit in high school, really enjoyed them, and I've always wanted to read sort of the Silmarillion and the extended sort of universe surrounding that time period in the First and Second Ages. However, I never really got into it because at the time, I don't know I think I just fell out of reading during my senior year of high school, because I read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit junior year of high school. And towards the end of junior year, I tried to read the Silmarillion, but it's very biblical in how it's written, so I was like, I can't really read this in right now. Like it was like May or something. I was like, I'm not investing this much, whatever. And I was renting them from the high school library, so I couldn't, keep it over the summer or whatever. So I ended up just sort of leaving it at the time, and I even tried reading this book at the time, but couldn't quite get into it because I didn't know what the hell was going on, and I didn't read the introduction at the time. I was like, okay, yeah, it's a standalone book about a story set before The Lord of the Rings or something, which that is true, but you kind of have to know the politics and the conflicts that are going on around with Morgoth in the First Age. And The Children of Húrin I should elaborate on this a little further, is about Húrin's children. So Húrin's a renowned warrior, and he defies Morgoth in this conflict towards the beginning, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, and ends up basically having a curse put on him by Morgoth, and in a way where his children are kind of doomed from a very young age. And Hurin, obviously being held by Morgoth, is made to watch the, kind of this whole thing unfold. He's dealing with this, or how Morgoth was making him deal with this. He was watching as his kids were growing up, and then essentially making decisions that would lead them into basically darker paths in their lives, and eventually resulting in their demises. And it's like a very tragic read, a very dark read. But I highly recommend it if you're interested in the Lord of the Rings, especially or any of Tolkien's other works. This is definitely up there, and they kind of go over this in the Silmarillion as well, but this obviously is its own standalone story, so this goes into more detail than the Silmarillion does, and so I definitely do recommend this book. And if you do pick it up and you don't know the politics or anything going around, or the context with the Silmarillion and what's going on in the First and Second Ages or whatever, definitely read the introduction by Christopher Tolkien, because this is published posthumously, I believe. And so Christopher was doing a lot of appendix and introductions and prefaces and sort of things with these with Tolkien's writings that were published posthumously. So I definitely recommend reading the introduction if you do pick this book up. You should not skip that. It's going to tell you, essentially, give you the background of what the story is, and kind of what time period it's situated in, and the politics kind of surrounding it. That was the last book that I read this month. Currently reading Jane Eyre, so maybe end of September I might go over that one. I don't know if I'm going to start doing singular book reviews as opposed to doing multiple book reviews for a month, because I don't know, I feel like with this I have to be very brief and go through one by one each time or whatever. But I guess with one we can really delve into it, because otherwise I feel like I'm just summarizing the plot in a way that's pitching it to you just to read, which I guess that's kind of what this is, but because I'm not going to assume anyone's read all of this or whatever. So yeah, but anyway, thought I would experiment with this and see how this goes. Hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your whatever it is, night, evening, afternoon, noon, morning, early morning, midnight, things like that, just sort of, just think about that. Forget about the books, just think about the time that you're in, and think about how it's coming for you. So I'll see ya.